Star Wars. Young Jedi Knights, Darkest Night, Chapter 16. Deep inside his hairy chest, Lubaka felt his heart contract with primal fear. He had known since childhood the dangers of descending into the perilous, untamed forests of Kashyyyk. The darkened depths often proved deadly even to those who had entered fully armed and trained. Nobody went to the underlevels willingly, but now, with Zeke and Rhonda Va and the stormtroopers pursuing them, Loey knew the primeval forest was their only chance. The last time he had ventured beneath the secure treetop cities had been to search out glossy fibers from the siren plant, which he wove into his prized belt. He had thought himself so brave to accomplish the task alone. Sierra's friend Rabba had gone by herself because Loey had. Despite her skills and courage, the dark-furred Wookiee female had never returned. But Loey was not alone this time. He and his friends could fight together against whatever dangers the forest held. Above and behind him he heard the crashing of boots and the snapping of twigs as armored Imperials followed them, shining brilliant glow beams into the dank, forever night levels. Startling exotic creatures that had never seen the light of day. A few random shots rang out as stormtroopers blasted the forest animals. Thick burned leaves smoldered, then out in a gasp of thick smoke. Loey and Sierra did their best to lead Jason and Tenel Ka, using their darkness-adapted Wookiee vision to find broad, sturdy branches along the trunks of the Wushir trees. Panting with a desperate effort, Loey wheezed encouragement. The friends pressed on blindly with no specific destination, knowing that they had to keep going if they were to lose their pursuers in the maze of the forest underworld. EMTD's round, yellow optical sensors shed a bright glow into the murk, the most illumination they could risk. "Do be careful with those branches, Master Lubaka," the droid said as a twig scratched his outer casing. "I wouldn't want to break loose and fall. That happened to me once already. If you recall, it was a frightful, unpleasant experience." Loey groaned, remembering the misadventure on Yavin 4. Losing the translating droid had caused other problems as well, since no one at the Jedi Academy had understood Loey's warnings that Jason and Jaina had been captured by the TIE pilot Coral. Behind them, lightning shot through the darkness and branches crackled as the stormtroopers opened fire again. Loey instinctively ducked, and Sierra dropped to a lower branch without bothering to test it for sturdiness. Streaks blazed across the thickets, interrupting in fire and choking smoke. "Hey, look out!" Jason cried. Tenel Ka grabbed onto a branch with her hand and swung down to Sierra's level. "This way," she said. "It's safe." Loey leapt after her, one arm around Jason's waist, then sprinted across the moss-covered boughs. Further from the warm sunlight, each forest level had a different ecosystem made of matted platforms of interlaced vines, branches that grew together, accumulations of mulch in which other plants, fungi, lichens, squirming flowers flourished. Thousands of insects, reptiles, birds, and rodents fled at the sound of the intruders. Loey chuffed for the others to follow him. Racing along on his flat feet, he wrinkled his black nose and sniffed the odor-condensed air. His nostrils tingled with a tantalizing, terrifying scent. A scent he had smelled before, something that had nearly cost him his life. In the lambent glow from EMTD's optical sensors, Loey saw the wide open maw of a siren plant. Its glossy yellow petals atop the blood-red stalk looked like a gaping mouth ready for a meal. The plant had somehow taken root in a crook between two intergrown branches and fed upon denizens of this forest level. The sparkling fibers that formed a plume at the carnivorous flower center shone temptingly bright, while a delicious scent lured unsuspecting victims. Beside him, Sierra also sniffed the air and spotted the deadly plant. She growled in anticipation, her patchwork-shaved fur standing on end. But Loey put a hand on her arm, shook his head, and gripped her arm firmly. He could tell his sister wanted to secure the precious siren fibers and prove her bravery as soon as possible. Sierra groaned in disappointment, but she clearly understood their priorities. Behind them, several levels up, the pursuing stormtroopers fired again, this time at some large creature crashing through the tree levels. Far too close. The Imperials were too close. With a growl, Sierra took the lead, and Loie guided his friends behind her. As she raced through the morass of branches, ducking her head to keep her red gold braids from snagging on thorns or low-hanging limbs, Tenel Ka reveled in the calisthenics and that pushed her body to its limits. She would have preferred to do it without the threat of sudden death from a blaster of a stormtrooper. Her reptilian armor covered only her torso, leaving her limbs unprotected from branches and insect bites. But she did not allow such minor inconveniences to bother her. As the companions ran deeper into the forest, Tenel Ka took care to maintain her balance and watched out for her friend Jason. Though he was highly skilled in sensing strange life forms, Jason was not physically capable as she was. This was a chase, the hunt. Here she was in her element. But at the moment, Tenel Ka was not the stalker, but the prey. Her reflexes were sharpened by her inability to see through the forest shadows. Her lightsaber could have lit the way, but she didn't dare ignite it for fear of drawing attention to their position. At the moment, her focus had to be on simply running. All around, she detected looming dangers that grew worse, more foreboding as they leapt from one level to the next, descending into thicker and more primeval wilderness. Tenel Ka sensed that the two Wookiees felt the increasing threat. Loie and Sierra moved more cautiously, supporting each other as they used their night vision to choose a branch. At an open, broad intersection of wide branches, the Wookiees paused, panting for breath. Jason slumped beside Tenel Ka, utterly exhausted. They knew they couldn't stop for long. During the brief rest, Tenel Ka remained standing. She turned a slow circle. Granite gray eyes narrowed, sharply attentive for movement, for predators lurking in the surrounding trees. Her Jedi senses detected no dangerous animals, only a tingling underlying threat that grew more and more powerful. Just then, a leathery plant tentacle wrapped quickly around Tenel Ka's waist and drew itself snug. Thin thorns dug into her flesh through her reptilian armor. She cried out. Suddenly, the air around them came alive with whipping, writhing vines from above. Both Wookiees howled and thrashed. Jason yelped. The thorny vines yanked him into the air, legs kicking, hands flailing. In an instant, Tenel Ka snatched her lightsaber, and ignoring the threat of revealing her position to stormtroopers, ignited the glowing turquoise blade. Her arm swept sideways, severing the vines that grasped her waist. Jason yelled again and managed to get his lightsaber out, too. Swinging above his head, he slashed through the vicious plant stems with a sizzling wet sound. The spicy smell of burned sap cascaded into the air. Lubaka roared and ignited his Jedi weapon, striking left and right with the molten bronze blade. Hungry tentacles snaked toward him, eager to pull the Wookiee upward to where the knotted cluster of vines came together in a cavernous opening that emitted sounds like rocks grinding together, a slavering gullet ready to smash them into digestible pieces. Two of the vines caught Sierra Cook and wrapped themselves tightly around her arms. She bared her Wookiee fangs and, bunching her powerful muscles, ripped the vines free of the central stem with brute force. The plant seemed not to notice. It went thrashing its tentacles, and its open gauntlet continued to mash and grind. Within moments, 3 lightsabers sliced away the clinging tentacles and left only twitching stumps at the end of the ferocious vine creature. "We've escaped," EMTD said. "Oh, how wonderful." "This is a fact," Tenel Ka agreed. She examined the red welts and oozing scratches she had received during the battle, then looked up toward the next level of branches. "But our lightsabers have attracted the enemy." The others turned to follow her gaze. On the branches above them, completely surrounding the group, stood a contingent of fully armed stormtroopers. Their blasters pointed down at the young Jedi Knights. Jason shut off the emerald beam of his lightsaber and squatted on the branch, breathing hard as he surveyed the encircling stormtroopers. In other circumstances, he would have found the underworld of Kashyyyk fascinating, filled as it was with insects and trees, ferns, vines, flowers, lizards, a million new pets for him to inspect and then set free. He found many of the life forms to be incomprehensible, unlike anything he had ever experienced. Even now, with stormtroopers like pale statues above, blasters at the ready, aimed at him, Jason could sense the hidden creatures around them. Near one of the stormtroopers who stood on the decaying branch, Jason noticed that a broad patch of bark lay wet and damp, like a molted tongue wrapped around the tree. It was thick, glistening, moving on a cellular level. Two more dark figures joined the gathering stormtroopers. The ominous Night Sister Vonda Ra, with her hard muscles, broad shoulders, and glittering black body armor, stood next to Zeke, his dark hair neatly tied back with a thong at the nape of his neck. His swirling, scarlet-lined cape undamaged by leaves or twigs. The stormtroopers shone glow rods down on the scene. "You are trapped, Jedi brats," Vonda Ra said. "It would be amusing to watch you grovel for your lives, but I can assure you it would do you no good." "We do not intend to grovel," Tenel Ka said, and the Night Sister glared at the young warrior from Dathomir. Jason focused his attention on the wide, mysterious, slick patch wrapped around the branch. It seemed like a river of damp leather, and as he concentrated, he felt a dim awareness, a rudimentary brain that was now more a cluster of reflexes. But the reflexes were all Jason needed right now. "I'm sorry it has come to this," Zeke said, "but I owe my allegiance to the Second Imperium now, and you are my sworn enemies. I can no longer deny it. It was my choice." Despite his words, the impression on Zeke's high cheekboned face and the disturbed look on his green eyes showed Jason how troubled he truly was. One of the stormtroopers moved sideways to get a cleaner shot at them. Jason watched. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Perhaps he sent out the thought with the Force, because the stormtrooper didn't take one more step. His heavy, booted foot planted himself squarely on the wide, wet patch. Without warning, the creature reacted. A slithering flap of wet, slimy meat in the form of a monstrous slug-like beast raised itself from its sleeping position. The motion knocked the stormtrooper completely off the branch, and he tumbled screaming to the depths of the forest. With a thick, slurping sound, the enormous slug creature reared up and up, thrashing from side to side, knocking two other stormtroopers from their platforms. The Imperial soldiers were thrown into pandemonium, shouting and shooting. Jason did his best to send a thought to the thing, identifying the white armor guard as the enemy and planning the idea that Jason, the two Wookiees, and Tenel Ka were the slow-witted creature's friends. Stormtroopers opened fire on the monster, but the blasters did little more than annoy it. Branches crashed and snapped, energy bolts ricocheted around the forest as the slug creature continued its reflexive attack. Jason stood transfixed, fascinated with the battle and the havoc the beast had already caused. Zeke and Vonda Ra shouted conflicting orders. The next thing Jason knew, Tenel Ka slammed him aside. A blaster bolt sizzled past him as she wrapped a vine around her arm, grasped his waist, and dove into a lower branch. The two Wookiees were already ahead of them in their headlong flight. Making quick use of the diversion, the young Jedi Knights continued down, dropping all the way to the bottom levels of the forest.